So if you haven't been in the loop, about a month ago, Legends of Tomorrow was cancelled after a 7-season run, and Batwoman was cancelled after a 3-season run. And this marks the first time that a mainline Arrowverse show has been cancelled. Constantine was also cancelled about 7 to 8 years ago, but it's not really in the same vein as two major Arrowverse shows on the CW. Obviously we've had some shows end before with the likes of Arrow, Supergirl and Black Lightning, but none of those three were technically cancelled. With Arrow and Supergirl, they had full-on final seasons that were planned out and intended to be the final ones. Black Lightning is kind of in more of a grey area because that season feels a little weird. There's also some behind the scenes drama and a bunch of other things that point to the show ending not really being planned out at the time. But it still technically got to go out on some of its own terms. Batwoman and Legends, on the other hand, they straight up have been forced to end with tons of storytelling potential left for both shows. But even beyond the fact that they had story left to tell, this sort of sets a worrying precedent for the potential future of the Arrowverse, because for the CW and just WB in general, it seems like what they want out of a TV show is really changing, and what we currently have for the Arrowverse doesn't really fit into what they want for a TV show. But I actually recorded a video about 2 weeks ago talking about how Legends and Batwoman had ended, and that this could mean that the Arrowverse, as we know it, was coming to an end. But college kind of got in the way again, and I had to hold off on editing it for a while, and by the time I was able to get back to it, the CW decided to cancel almost half their shows, including another DC show, Naomi. And it kind of became clear that it wasn't just the Arrowverse getting targeted. On top of this, a lot of stuff I said in that video were kind of just assumptions on my part, based on the fact that we'd heard a lot of pretty worrying things about the future of DC in WB, and so a lot of what came out immediately after the following round of CW cancellations proved me wrong for the most part. So basically, I would have looked pretty damn stupid if I uploaded that video, and a new one is pretty necessary. So I kind of just want to talk about my overall feelings on these shows getting ended abruptly, and if this is a sign of what the future of the Arrowverse holds, which honestly I do think it is. But real quick before going further, I just want to ask if you can subscribe if you're not already. I make videos pretty irregularly, but I tried to cover mostly DC and Marvel, and I'm hoping to get into a somewhat regular schedule again with video uploads this summer. I'm also hoping to get the channel to 1k this year, so any support at all really helps. But up until literally this year, the CW has been very, very lenient on their shows and lenient on what gets cancelled and what doesn't. It's pretty common knowledge that they don't really care about ratings or even really critical opinions on their shows. They rely on streaming deals for the most part, and that's worked out pretty well for them. So much so that the last time they cancelled a show that was beyond its first season was back in 2015, and even back then that was kind of shocking. So it's become pretty commonplace to believe that if a CW show gets to season 2, it's gonna always have the opportunity to go out on its own terms and not have to worry about being cancelled. Well, this unfortunately is not the case at all anymore, and going forward it seems like the CW shows are gonna have to be performing a lot better than they currently have been if they want to get more seasons. I'm going to talk a bit about what the future of the Arrowverse looks like in a minute, but first I want to kind of just talk about how I feel about the cancellation of these shows. There have been a lot of conflicting information on them, and in the first couple of weeks some people working on Legends have said one thing, while heads at the CW have come out and said other things. For Legends, we've heard that heads at WB were in their corner, telling them to do something big towards the end in hopes of getting renewed, hence why Booster Gold got added in the last minutes of the show. Then, for some of the higher-ups at the CW, we've heard that it comes down to the fact that these shows just weren't profitable, weren't getting the viewers required, and even that the studios that Legends and Batwoman would use to film didn't get their leases renewed, and thus there would have been nowhere for the shows to film next seasons. We've also heard that people at Legends and Batwoman were aware for a while that a cancellation could happen, and that it was even kind of likely. The people at Batwoman heeded this and tried to wrap their season up a little neatly just in case, but the people at Legends decided to risk it anyway and end on a cliffhanger in an attempt to get people to want another season. Both endings sort of make sense, but honestly it is a little annoying that the people at Legends did a cliffhanger even though they knew this could happen. And this isn't new. There have been so many times in the past where a show that is on the bubble decides to do a crazy cliffhanger in the hopes that this will push people to want the show to get renewed, and a lot of times it has failed, and it just kind of ruins how people look back on the show, which is kind of unfortunate, because now we're set we're sort of left in this situation where possible fans in the future will just decide not to watch Legends because it ends on a cliffhanger, and the Legends crew should have looked at the situation and decided what was best for the show, for the future of the show, because even the episode before the final would have worked as a really good ending for the show. But even with all this said, this should have never happened at all. Like, it's honestly really crazy that we got to this point, because Legends and Batwoman are important for so many reasons, not just due to their connections to the Arrowverse and DC, but just because of the representation that they give to so many people. I know that there are a lot of people out there who don't like these shows, but for the people who do like them, they're really, really important. And with Legends of Batwoman over, we now only have The Flash and Superman and Lois as true Arrowverse shows hanging around. Stargirl is in a kind of grey area where it can be argued that it is an Arrowverse show or it isn't an Arrowverse show. The fact that it's taking part in the comic book Earth Prime crossover probably bodes well for the fact that it is like a full-on connected show to these ones. But the fact it takes place on another Earth and that all of its characters haven't really met anybody else from the other shows yet kind of puts it in that grey area. Gotham Knights has gotten greenlit, but that show is apparently its own continuity completely, and since they're even using some characters from Batwoman on that show but just recast versions, it seems like that's truly its own thing and it's going to be its own universe. The only other show that's possible to continue on the Arrowverse was Justice U, which that's the show starring David Ramsey's John Diggle, but there has been no word on that show since it got announced, and being completely honest, at this point I'd be really surprised if that show gets made, because it was announced around the same time as Gotham Knights, and now Gotham Knights already has a pilot filmed and is already going to be debuting in 2023, whereas Justice U, we've just heard nothing about it. The Flash could totally be ending within the next few years, because Season 9 was teased as a possible ending point for a while now, but that's not confirmed. The Flash could totally be ending within the next few years. Season 9 was teased as a possible ending point for a while now, but that's not confirmed. And I'm honestly not really sure if the show will end here, because I think it can go either way. Stargirl is also a show that can go either way. It was always originally planned to be a pretty short-term show, and I think that when it first started they said that 5 seasons was kind of the plan that they would aim for, and as much as I love Stargirl, I think that the show having a tight 5-season run would be best for the show in the long run. Like, genuinely this would make the show age better than maybe any other comic book show out there other than like Daredevil. But even this is kind of in the air. Stargirl Again Beyond Season 3 isn't confirmed, and the show seems to be a bit more high maintenance in terms of budget and time needed than the rest of the shows, so this could play a part in Stargirl maybe ending earlier than it was intended. Superman and Lois is probably the safest of any current DC show, other than maybe Peacemaker. Because for Superman and Lois, for all intents and purposes, it's a critical darling for Warner Brothers, and for this reason this show could easily go on as long as they want. But even with this, I've heard it mentioned a few times that this show may not be intended to go on for 6, 8 or 10 seasons like the rest of the shows, and it could easily top out at 4 or 5. But with all this said, the future of the Arrowverse is in serious doubt, whether we want to admit it or not. I think it's kind of clear that the days of big crossovers and like 4 episodes airing every week is very much in the past. And I think it's possible we'll get an Armageddon style event in Flash Season 9, but as fun as Armageddon on its own was, I think a big reason why the fandom was so into it last year is because it sort of felt like this was the side meal to tide you over until the main meal gets here. The main meal being huge multi-show crossover like Crisis on Infinite Earths, Crisis on Earth X, Elseworlds, etc. Now, it's kind of clear that an Armageddon-style event really is the most we can hope for next year, and that's not even a given. At this point, I'm kind of feeling like maybe Crisis should have just been the end for these shows, so that they could go out with a proper ending rather than continue for an extra few years just for the remaining shows to get cancelled or fizzled out like what's been happening. I think the most we can hope for currently is that The Flash Season 9 or Season 10 serves as an ending for the Arrowverse, and I could totally see Eric Wallace and the crew on that show roping in some characters from Legends and Batwoman so that they get a satisfying finish for their shows or for their characters in some sort of event. And then I could also see them ending Flash with a story that ties back to the original promise of some kind of big Crisis event in 2024. Even though Crisis did get moved up to 2019, I think it'd still be pretty damn cool for 2024 to be important in the new timeline for the current characters as well. Whether that means another Crisis or just some event that brings some older characters back, I think that'd be really, really cool. Plus, we know Stephen Amell has been pretty open to returning to the Arrowverse recently, so I think it'd be a bit of a miss for the crew on Flash not to take notice of that and not to try and do something with that character. All in all though, this is genuinely kind of depressing how everything with these shows have turned out. The Arrowverse is super special to me, and I've been watching since Arrow first started, and it's probably the most invested I've been in a TV show or a movie ever. I started making videos so that I could talk about Arrow and Flash, so to see them slowly fizzle out like this is kind of disheartening, although I'm happy Arrow at least got to have a proper ending, because I think Arrow, like, even Supergirl, I think Supergirl had a decent final season, but I think Supergirl, even there, like, there were moments where it didn't feel like it was planned to be a final season until the very end, whereas Arrow, I'm just really happy that Arrow, true and true, had this really tight final season that it kept reminding you that this is the end non-stop, and I really did like that. So I'm just happy that Arrow got that. I think Flash will definitely at least get like a planned out final season, so I don't think Flash is going to get cancelled or anything, but I feel like Legends and Batwoman, they deserve that, especially Legends, since we had 7 seasons. Everyone involved in that show deserved to get to plan out their ending and have it be an ending. But how do you feel about all this? Are you annoyed they're cancelled? Are you worried about the future of the Arrowverse? And I'm going to try and get back into making videos pretty regularly this week, hopefully. Superman and Lois is also back this week, so I'm really excited to make some more videos on that. But thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, and all of that. And I hope you have a great day.